want to rent a movie.
You want to rent a movie?
I want to rent a movie. What's that for?
You work in a video store.
I work in a video store. I want to go to a good video store so I can get a good movie.
1994 was a huge year at the movies. There's a clear delineation point of movies before 1994 and movies after 1994. And the biggest reason for that was the most influential movie of the 90s, Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction. This movie was like throwing a hand grenade into a crowded theater. People's heads exploded from the stylized hyper-violence, the non-linear storytelling, and the rapid-fire pop culture-infused dialogue. Tarantino introduced us to a whole new genre of film. Much like Nirvana, just a few years earlier, had destroyed the corporate hair rock of the 80s, a new wave of indie filmmakers were about to change Hollywood forever. This is also the year that Kevin Smith's Clerks was released, which despite its humble beginnings, became a hugely influential film, maxing out thousands of copycat filmmakers' credit cards, who hoped to pull off the nearly impossible dream of making your own movie a nationwide hit. Hollywood had a huge year as well, with films like Forrest Gump, True Lies, Speed, and The Lion King wowing audiences worldwide. And suddenly, Jim Carrey was everywhere.
Hi, I'm looking for Ray Finkel and a clean pair of shorts.
Cracking us all up and lighting the box office on fire with 3 starring film roles. So let's step back 30 years and take a look at the films of 1994.
Ooh. This doesn't sound like the usual mindless, boring, getting to know you chit-chat. This sounds like you actually have something to say.
Well, I do.
Like most years, January was not a big release month, with unmemorable films like The Air Up There, House Party 3, and Iron Will being the highest-grossing films of the month. A film that bombed hard, but has grown into a bit of a cult classic, is the offbeat fantasy comedy Cabin Boy. It's a guilty pleasure with a great cast of characters.
You couldn't be cuter.
Hey, would you like to buy a monkey?
In February, the 1993 film Schindler's List went into wide release and proceeded to dominate the Oscars a month later. But since it's technically a 93 film, we'll instead talk about a film that's on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, Jim Carrey's Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. This film came out of nowhere and became a massive cultural phenomenon. Before this film, Jim Carrey had been bouncing around Hollywood for a decade, doing small roles in large movies or large roles in small movies, but began to show real promise on the Wayans Brothers sketch comedy show In Living Color, where Carrey had created many memorable over-the-top characters like Fire Marshal Bill and Vera DeMilo. Writer-director Tom Shadyac managed to capture lightning in a bottle with Carrey as the titular Ace Ventura. Shadyac's script had been floating around for a while, and the role had been turned down by a strange mix of actors, like Rick Moranis, Judd Nelson, Alan Rickman, and Whoopi Goldberg. But is it even possible to imagine anyone except Carrey playing Ace Ventura now? Once on board, Carrey made the film his own, recreating the character in his style and improvising many of the film's most famous moments. His manic performance was like catnip to young boys, and for years you couldn't go anywhere without somebody trying to do an impression of him.
Do not go in there. Woo!
That was just the start of Carrey's incredible year. In July, he showed up again in The Mask. This film, based on a comic book of the same name, stars Carrey as a green-faced superhero of sorts, who through the power of a magical mask can cartoonishly transform his body and the surroundings to save the day. The film also features the debut of Cameron Diaz, who went on to become one of the biggest stars of the decade. But again, it's Jim Carrey's incredibly manic performance that makes the film. The film's CGI looks pretty goofy and childish now, but at the time they were state-of-the-art, and the film was nominated for a Best Special Effects Oscar.
With these powers, I could be
A superhero!
I could fight crime, protect the innocent.
Work for world peace!
But first,
At this point, Jim Carrey was the biggest movie star on the planet, having starred in 2 of the biggest comedies of the year. But somehow, his third comedy of '94 made even more money. Dumb and Dumber is the Farrelly Brothers' debut film, in which 2 brain-dead friends go on a road trip to return a lost piece of luggage to a woman Carrey's character, Lloyd, has fallen in love with. Again, the film comes alive thanks to Carrey's brilliant comedic performance, and the normally straight-faced Jeff Daniels somehow almost equals him. After 3 monster hits in a row, Carrey was firmly entrenched as the go-to comedian for Hollywood for the rest of the decade, becoming the first actor to be paid $20 million for his role in The Cable Guy 2 years later.
I've had it with this dump! We got no food, we got no jobs, our pets' heads are falling off!
Going back to February, the other film of real note is Reality Bites. Ben Stiller stars in and directs this biting satirical romantic comedy that also features Ethan Hawke, Winona Ryder, and Janine Garofalo. This movie and Singles define Generation X's coming of age.
That is literally the nicest thing that anyone's ever said to me.
March and April were pretty quiet in terms of films that stand the test of time. The British romantic comedy Four Weddings and a Funeral being the biggest hit of these months. It also went on to be nominated for Best Picture. There was the mostly forgotten Coen brothers film The Hudsucker Proxy, which is in need of some critical reevaluation.
You know, for kids.
Why don't I just type this up?
Guillermo del Toro's first film Cronos was released. The very strange comedy Clifford, starring Martin Short as a 10-year-old boy who tortures his uncle Charles Grodin, was a box office dud, but this weird kids film now has its fans.
In the name of all that's holy, somebody help my uncle. He's an innocent man, I tell you. An innocent man. Mission accomplished, friend.
The Nick Cage neo-noir thriller Red Rock West was also overlooked at the time, but it is well worth seeing. And PCU, starring a young Jeremy Piven, has become a bit of a college comedy cult classic.
Well, here's all you need to know. Classes, nothing before 11. Beer, it's your best friend, you drink a lot of it. Women, you're a freshman, so it's pretty much out of the question. We have a car?
No, but...
Someone on your hall will. Find them and make friends with them on the first day. Anything else?
In May, the big hits were Mel Gibson's Western comedy Maverick and the famous Hanna-Barbera cartoon The Flintstones brought to life. They're both fine Hollywood drivel and completely unremarkable.
And somewhere down there is the ignorant stooge who will make all my schemes come true.
Instead, I'd rather talk about The Crow. Getting a little personal here. Brandon Lee's death during the making of this film is the first time in my life I can remember a celebrity's death truly affecting me. I can't totally speak as to why. I had only seen him in one film before, 1991's action flick Showdown in Little Tokyo, which I enjoyed his performance in that, but it wasn't anything memorable. I think it was that I was just beginning to show interest in filmmaking, and that an actor so young could be killed making a movie broke me. Add in the fact that he's Bruce Lee's son who had also died tragically young. It just didn't seem fair. So I went to see The Crow with great trepidation, as it had this huge dark cloud hanging over it. The film had to be amazing, or I would hate it. Thankfully, I wasn't disappointed, as I remember being completely floored by the visuals. The whole look of the film felt new to me. Mixed with a satisfying revenge story, great villains, and an industrial rock soundtrack that I played on repeat for years. I adored this film. Does it have the same effect now? Not quite. But it's still a very fun watch. And I'll forever be sad that we didn't get more Brandon Lee films, as I think he could have been a major action film star coming out of it.
I see you have made your decision. Now let's see you enforce it.
June had two of the biggest hits of the year, Speed and The Lion King. Speed is a serviceable, die-hard-on-a-blank type action film, full of ridiculous action set pieces as a city bus jumps over a massive gap in a freeway, somehow makes 90-degree turns, and battles LA traffic while never going below 50 miles per hour. Keanu Reeves is really goofy as this tough-as-nails cop.
I don't know you, man. I'm not here for you. Let's not do this.
Dennis Hopper is having fun as the over-the-top baddie, and Sandra Bullock really pops, becoming a pretty big movie star from this supporting role. Somehow it all works, and audiences ate it up, making it one of the biggest action films of the year.
There's a bomb on a bus. Once the bus goes 50 miles an hour, the bomb is armed. If it drops below 50, it blows up. What do you do? What do you do?
In 1994, Disney was 3 movies into their 90s renaissance, after their disastrous set of 80s feature releases. Disney was back on top of family entertainment after their run of The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Aladdin. The Lion King became the biggest hit of them all. The story of the young lion cub Simba having to overcome the death of his father and a power struggle with his Uncle Scar, with the help of his jungle buddies Timon and Pumbaa. Hit the mark with kids of all ages. This film dominated that summer, grossing almost $1 billion worldwide, becoming the #1 film of the year.
Simba! I'm a little surprised to see you alive.
Coming in second at the box office in 1994 was the July release of Forrest Gump. This Robert Zemeckis film feels like a magic trick, with Tom Hanks deftly performing the dim-witted Forrest through a series of important American historical events, meeting and influencing everyone from Elvis to JFK, all backed up by the most on-the-nose soundtrack of all time. The film is an incredible lifetime of adventures that range from hysterical to tear-jerking. Somehow, this huge mishmash of weirdness all comes together perfectly. If somebody besides Hanks stars, it probably doesn't work. If Zemeckis doesn't make it in '94, it probably doesn't work, as the effects were just reaching the point of making this all believable, and he had the perfect filmmaking touch all the way through. Just a few films later, after 2000's Castaway, Zemeckis lost his fastball and hasn't made another worthwhile film since.
And that's all I have to say about that.
July also had the re-teaming of James Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger with the action spy comedy True Lies, after 1991's Terminator 2. To say this was majorly anticipated by action fans is an understatement. It's one of Cameron's lesser films, more of a lightweight James Bond romp than his other, more headier sci-fi films. But it's a damn well-made action film, and it was the hit that Schwarzenegger needed, coming off the disastrous release of 1993's Last Action Hero. Sadly, it was Arnold's last great film, as it was a slow, steady decline in the quality of his films from here.
Have you ever killed anyone?
Yeah, but they were all bad.
August's biggest hit was Clear and Present Danger, the third of the 90s Jack Ryan films, after Hunt for Red October and Patriot Games. It's a pretty good Harrison Ford spy action thriller, but the film that had the most impact that August was Oliver Stone's Natural Born Killers. There was quite the controversy around this film, in that it seems to celebrate two serial killers as they murder their way across the country, with the media covering them like superstars. At the time, this film blew audiences away with its mix of hyper-violence and over-the-top filmmaking, with Stone seemingly switching film stocks every few seconds. The film holds up as a weird 90s time capsule, but won't hit modern viewers the same way it did 30 years ago.
It's just murder, man. All God's creatures do it in some form or another. I mean, you look in the forest. You got species killing other species, our species killing all species, including the forest, and we just call it industry, not murder.
Again, this was Stone's last film that really impacted culture in a major way. Are we seeing a trend here? That maybe the old guard is moving on? The film's script was originally written by Quentin Tarantino, who had also written the script to the well-received True Romance. He had also written and directed one small heist film, Reservoir Dogs, which was a Sundance hit and had cinephiles buzzing about a new talent. Despite those successes, his name wasn't known by most people yet, but we're only a month away from him becoming the hottest filmmaker in the world.
Would you forget about it in a day or two?
Yeah, well, the days of me forgetting are over. The days of me remembering have just begun.
First, we go to September, which saw the release of the internet's all-time favorite film, The Shawshank Redemption. You wouldn't think it now, but the film was not that well received by general audiences, making only $16 million on its initial release. For example, Time Cop and The River Wild, two mediocre action films released the same month, both almost tripled that. Shawshank's influence on film culture was a slow burn. This dark and depressing prison drama based on a short story by Stephen King was adapted and directed to near perfection by Frank Darabont. Didn't catch on until it was released to video and cable, where it has become an absolute favorite of film nerds and has famously held on to the #1 spot on IMDb's top 250 movies since 2008, just narrowly beating out The Godfather and The Dark Knight.
I understand you're a man that knows how to get things.
Yeah, I'm known to locate certain things from time to time. What do you want?
Rita Hayworth.
Another film that bombed that September that is still well worth seeing is Ed Wood. This odd biopic of the infamously bad filmmaker, as brought to life by Johnny Depp, with Tim Burton in the director's chair. This black and white film lovingly recreates many of Wood's so bad they're good films. Again, Burton hasn't made a film this good since. abandoning much of his independent weirdness to make a lot of Hollywood schlock in the past 3 decades.
I work fast and I'm a deal. I write and direct, and I'm good. I just did a play in Hollywood, and Victor Crowley himself praised its realism.
There's about 500 guys in this town that can say the same thing.
October would mark a major event in the history of Hollywood. First, it was the addition of sound. Then they made the pictures color. And finally, there was Pulp Fiction. Now, its impact wasn't quite that big, but there was a major cultural shift in movies for at least a decade. Tarantino's second film hit the industry like a tsunami. This indie film racked up box office and awards like no independent film before it. The film's production company, Miramax, became a major player, and they had an unprecedented run of successful indie films afterwards. The Tarantino influence over filmmaking was also undeniable. Suddenly, every action film had to be extremely quippy, with the characters making constant pop culture references, and the violence had to be ironic and bloody. The film revived John Travolta's career, introduced the world to Sam Jackson, and made Uma Thurman a star. Bruce Willis was already a huge movie star, but it upped his cool level quite a bit, and probably prolonged his A-level status by another decade. Tarantino, of course, has gone on to become one of the world's most important filmmakers.
What happened here was a miracle, and I want you to fucking acknowledge it.
All right, it was a miracle. Can we go now?
While a ton of the credit of the industry's shift towards indie films goes to Pulp Fiction, it was also greatly helped out by Clerks, amazingly also released by Miramax only a week later, with its characters also talking in a stylized, rapid-fire fashion, while making tons of pop culture references.
Think the average stormtrooper knows how to install a toilet main? All they know is killing in white uniforms.
Kevin Smith's debut film didn't kill it at the box office, managing to only make a touch over $3 million. Its true cultural impact didn't hit until its release on video in '95. But what really made the film important was the story behind it, that Kevin Smith had written, directed, and produced the film for only $28,000, largely funded by Smith's credit cards. It was astonishing that such a small film could get a major theatrical release, become a comedy phenomenon, and kickstart a major Hollywood career. Clerks and Robert Rodriguez's 1993 movie El Mariachi, made for only $7,000, and his book Rebel Without a Crew about the making of that film, made many want-to-be indie filmmakers try to follow their footsteps into Hollywood careers.
You know, there's a million fine-looking women in the world, dude, but they don't all bring you lasagna at work. Most of them just cheat on you.
The other notable film from that month is Heavenly Creatures. This is Peter Jackson's first grown-up film. His first 3 films, Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, and Dead Alive, are all super fun, but they're silly gore-a-thons with non-stop tasteless jokes. Heavenly Creatures, on the other hand, is a taut, fantastical drama about 2 teenage girls who fall in love and decide they must escape their overbearing parents at any cost, starring Kate Winslet in one of her first roles and Melanie Lynskey in her acting debut. Both actresses have gone on to long, storied careers, and this is likely the film that got Peter Jackson the Lord of the Rings job a few years later.
Cheer up. All the best people have bad chests and bone diseases. It's all frightfully romantic.
October also had 2 pretty big hits, both racking up almost $200 million each. The okay at best Sly Stallone and Sharon Stone action flick The Specialist, which has mostly been forgotten by now. And Stargate, a silly but fun Kurt Russell sci-fi action film directed by Roland Emmerich.
But we found something a lot more interesting.
Excuse me. This information has become classified.
November had 2 standard Hollywood hits, with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt starring in An Interview with a Vampire, based on the best-selling novel, and Disney's The Santa Claus, a family-friendly Christmas movie starring Tim Allen.
Weird. Ow.
But the best film of that month is Léon, aka The Professional. This was the American cut of the French filmmaker Luc Besson's action thriller, starring Jean Reno, and introducing us to Natalie Portman. You fall in love with the characters, despite the film's strange father-daughter relationship between Léon, a professional killer, and an orphan 12-year-old girl, while Gary Oldman brilliantly chews the scenery as a dirty cop on their tail. But what makes the film stand out is its remarkably well-directed and shot action scenes. It's a must-see.
It's when you start to become really afraid of death that you learn to appreciate life.
We close out the year with the previously mentioned Dumb and Dumber being the biggest hit of December. And we also saw the Michael Douglas sexual thriller Disclosure, a Little Women adaptation starring Susan Sarandon, Winona Ryder, Kirsten Dunst, and Claire Danes, and the Brad Pitt epic western Legends of the Fall being the other big releases of the month.
We have information that you're transporting goods in violation of the Volstead Act.
Well, if you mean a case of Irish whiskey from my father, I am.
I have to ask you to give it up.
I'd be a bit disappointed.
The Oscars for 1994 remain rife with controversy even 3 decades later, with Forrest Gump taking most of the major awards, including a win for Best Picture over Pulp Fiction and The Shawshank Redemption, 2 films that have gone on to much more critical acclaim since then. Many critics cite Gump's win over Pulp Fiction as one of the biggest travesties in the history of the Academy Awards. However, Tarantino did win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay.
I think this is probably the only award I'm going to win here tonight, so I was trying to think maybe I should just say a whole lot of stuff right here, right now, just get it all in my system. Because I thought about all year long, everything building up and everything, and just blow it all just tonight, just say everything. But I'm not. Thanks.
But there's no doubt that 1994 was an incredibly important year in the history of film. It was the year that independent film became legit, introducing the world to a massive filmmaking talent in Quentin Tarantino, while his contemporary Kevin Smith gave hope to anyone with a camera that they too could go on to have a successful Hollywood career. The Shawshank Redemption and Forrest Gump remain beloved classics that will live on forever. Ed Wood and The Natural Born Killers are fantastic films from important filmmakers who both never quite hit the same heights. And films like Speed, The Lion King, Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, Leon, The Crow, True Lies, and many more remain rewatchable favorites for lovers of 90s cinema. What is your favorite 1994 film?
We trust this will fill your needs. We now consider the matter closed. Please stop sending us letters.
Thanks for watching, Tonglers. Please like and subscribe.